Is Ukraine continuing to bamboozle us in their counteroffensive? Where is it really happening? And are Russia's elite Chechen fighters going to be in a little bit of trouble? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's June 7th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay. First, we look at the control map, and the biggest changes here have first off been in and around the Burkiva Reservoir. You can see, as we've discussed, Russian forces repositioning, but this is more than a repositioning of their positions, right? So we've seen some adjustments that, as we discussed, really tend to favor the defenders, right? Using natural terrain to your advantage. And maybe that's what Russia's doing here, trying to use this river or canal here as a natural barrier. But when you see these sort of dramatic withdrawals, what it may instead be is actually a failure of a military maneuver called a break contact or breaking contact drill. And breaking contact is tough because it involves large numbers of units removing or large numbers of personnel withdrawing while still in contact with the enemy. Let's see if we can find it here. It's called Battle Drill 3 Break Contact. The unit is moving as part of a larger force conducting movement to contact or attack. Following direct fire contact with the enemy, the unit leader decides to break contact, right? And it's considered an absolutely essential battle drill. It's literally number 3. And this is when you encounter an enemy force that you don't think you can handle. So instead, you need to begin to withdraw under fire. This is hard stuff. There's a reason it is a 12-step process, and it is something the Army emphasizes heavily. But you can see it involves a lot of actions by the unit leader, suppressing the enemy, directing vehicles to support the disengagement of a dismounted element, right? Distance, direction, terrain. You have to have a planned point to regroup, indirect fires, coordinating a bounding element, a base of fire that remains in contact, right? Moving element, occupying designated overwatch positions and engaging the enemy, and then moving the base of fire element back. It's a very technical process. It's not easy, and it requires very well-trained troops. It's literally needs to be drilled into them because it's so easy for that process, that breaking contact, to become a rout. And when you see these sort of units under pressure that suddenly bound backwards heavily, it's possible that what you're seeing is a failed break contact drill, where they're supposed to reposition in a certain location, but due to poor leadership, lack of guidance, unclear processes, or a failure of communication, instead, you have these units simply retreating wholesale. It's also possible, again, that many of these units near Bakhmut are being given orders to break contact because they're needed to stabilize lines elsewhere near Volodar, Avdiivka, or even north, right? Wherever they think that the Ukrainian offensive is coming. Because when we look to the south somewhat, we can see that Ukrainian offensive efforts have also begun to produce returns. You can see here, again, not a particularly valuable piece of terrain, just really 2 windbreaks. But it still reflects that instead of what Russia has promised is their elite Chechen forces, their Akhmat special forces, engaging in offensive operations near Avdiivka. Instead, what we've seen over the last, you can see 3 days, instead, the southern flank around Avdiivka has instead been pushed back. Now, again, is this part of a larger offensive, or is this simply a shaping operation to pin the elite Chechen forces in place? Elite, as we've discussed, they're not really that elite. They're just fresh. To pin them in place or attrit them in order to give Ukrainian forces inside of Avdiivka more breathing room. I think that's more likely what we're seeing here. And because Ukraine has actually claimed that it is not actually running its counteroffensive. Now, if you're curious about not just the news about the counteroffensive, but about the larger strategic situation, well, that you can check out the Strategic SitRep. This is my newsletter that I just launched, basically in response to the fact that there is a lot of clickbait out there in the national security news space. And I wanted to create a simple, easy to read summary of the most important news stories. It drops once a week. And as you can see, we provide a summary of the story and then a deeper dive, a so what. So you understand the story in its context, what it really means for things. You can see we talk about the Afghan-Iran border clashes over water disputes. And we understand why this is so significant. Afghanistan and under the Taliban choosing to engage Iran. You also, of course, have China's defense minister defending its dangerous maneuvers in the Taiwan Strait. We summarize the article, and then you get the implications, the understanding of just what exactly the so what of this story. So if you're interested in checking out the Strategic SitRep, the link is in the description, or you can go to StrategicSitRep.com. It's free. Just sign up in your email, and once a week, you'll get the stories you need. Okay, looking at the combat map, you can see that Russian forces are actually still somewhat on the offensive. 30 combat engagements in the last 24 hours, which is on the low end, but certainly not anywhere near zero. And it remains fascinating that you're seeing this number, not necessarily this number of combat engagements, because that makes sense, but instead that you're seeing continued offensive action in places where there isn't clearly a Ukrainian force to counterattack, right? If you're on the defensive, you're going to save your forces for counterattacks, spoiling attacks, recons by fire. You're going to try your best to use your offensive forces in very, very efficient ways. The defense is about efficiency. It's about making the enemy expend more resources, more munitions, more personnel than you do. And so launching these attacks, I struggle to make sense of them, except for maybe this attack series sort of near Avdiivka, where they may be trying to put pressure on some of the Ukrainian forces that are pushing here along this southern flank of Avdiivka. You may see something similar here, maybe this offensive work near Klachivka, maybe trying to pressure or provide some sort of cover, so to speak, to the forces withdrawing near Burkiva. But these sort of actions, it's really not clear that this is a good use of Russia's very limited personnel resources. Now, what I wanted to talk about and make one other interesting point, which is just a classic Russian move. As we talked about yesterday, they have chosen to destroy the dam near Zaporizhzhia, unleashing a torrent of floodwaters downstream, creating a massive humanitarian crisis you could see in the downtown region of Kherson. But what's also just classic Russia, they also flooded many of their own defensive positions, which sort of indicates that, again, there was a failure of command as Russian forces established defensive works along this northern bank of the Dnipro, only to have other Russian forces flood them out. So this is just really, really a failure of communication by Russian forces, which is absolutely par for the course for their military command. Again, when you have this sort of weak command and control, these are the exact sort of issues that you will expect to see. Coordination, collaboration, right? The individuals making the call to blow this dam probably, even though they're geographically very close, they probably don't have much in common. They may not even they may not have a unified chain of command outside of the Kremlin. So it's possible these soldiers had absolutely no idea that these floodwaters were not just coming, but had been planned for some time as an operation. It's been pointed out that the river levels leading up to the dam had actually been at an all-time high. You could see Russia deliberately, the belief is, raise the water levels and then destroy the dam to maximize the flooding devastation downstream. Again, this is absolutely 100% a war crime. It's targeting civilian infrastructure with no clear military value. So anyway, guys, thank you as always. Of course, a special thank you to the members of combatvetnews.com. You guys, the Colonel tier members, I appreciate you guys so much. You're the 1% of the 1%. And thanks to the Lieutenant tier members, the 1% of viewers that are out here supporting me on combatvetnews.com, getting those daily update or weekly updates that I can't show anywhere else. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one.